Welcome to No Greater Love, the Four Chaplains and the Sinking of the Dorchester. This program is sponsored by the World War II Veterans Committee. Chapter 3, Unsinkable Virtue.
Forgive us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them.
Mr. Speaker, this month our nation commemorates the anniversary of one of the most tragic and at the same time inspirational incidents in our nation's history. It was the night of February 3rd, 1943, when brave chaplains George I. Fox, Clark V. Poling, Protestant ministers, Alexander D. Good, a rabbi, and John P. Washington, a Roman Catholic priest, laid down their lives aboard the USAT Dorchester so that others might live on.
Hello, I'm Gene Pell. Our nation's towering contribution to the world is in demonstrating the validity of what has become known as the American way: order under liberty and diversity within unity. While acts performed in defense of our freedoms include many examples of extraordinary heroism, each one deserving of praise and remembrance, the United States Congress has bestowed special honors upon the Four Chaplains of World War II. The impartial giving of a life jacket from a rabbi, priest, or reverend to a young soldier of unidentified faith exemplified the fellowship we share as children of God. This symbol of tolerance and brotherhood, hallmarks of the American ideal, is what prompts New York Congressman Ben Gilman and his colleagues on Capitol Hill to honor the Four Chaplains year after year with resolutions, authorizations, and commemorations.
Well, I first came on the story of the Four Chaplains as part of my work as a former county commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I was deeply impressed by their courage and concern for their fellow men. All of them fulfilled their chaplaincy responsibilities in an outstanding manner of taking care of the wounded people, making certain that they were given the proper life-saving equipment, the life vest, and calming down the hysteria that existed among some of the men. I remember survivors saying it was the chaplain's loud prayers that calmed him down, and he was able to make his way to a lifeboat in a heroic world. Mr. Speaker, in memory of the Four Chaplains, let us dedicate ourselves to reconstruct that historic world, a world where ideals and principles reign supreme. As I go back over the history of these outstanding men, I vividly recall their service at a time of crisis on board the Dorchester when there was panic and chaos and men jumping over the ship.
I couldn't go through the ship because of the destruction. So I start going around up by the forward guns around, and I look down and I see a bunch of heads. I get down and who was it? Chaplain Good, Chaplain Washington, Fox, and Poling is up against the wall, facing about 9 men. Their final service is going to go on.
A soldier wandered into their midst. He was in a daze. His lifeboat was out of commission, and he couldn't find his life belt. He looked blankly at the chaplains and started moving off. Father Washington grabbed him by the arm. The chaplain unhooked his own life preserver and slipped it over the head of the soldier. "God bless you, Father," I heard the soldier mumble, and he moved toward the railing.
We start praying. Father Washington lost his glasses. I couldn't recognize him. And Poling looked just stern. Fox is the same way.
Other soldiers without life belts wandered helplessly on the deck. They were also stopped. In the space of a minute, the chaplains had all taken off their own life preservers and strapped them on the backs of soldiers who needed them.
Even if the chaplains were out of my sight, I could still hear their voices, loud and firm in prayer.
After we started praying, I knew that none of them were going to go.
I said, come on, we better go. We better go. This thing is really not going to last too much longer. It's going to go under.
I just says, let's go. And I said goodbye to my friends, and I wished them luck, and that was it. I told Vince, I'm jumping over the rail, and I'm going down to the lifeboat. You will follow me and do exactly as I do. I said, do you understand? He said, yes, Ben, I'm going to follow you and head for the lifeboat as you do. Regretfully, that was the last time I saw Vince.
Well, I got on this lifeboat and it sank. And I crawled back up on. And there's another guy there, and I said, let's jump. And he said, I'm scared. I said, so am I. That's the last I seen him. I don't know.
They were lined against the ship, and nobody was even moving. All the men standing at the rail and were frozen out of fear, and I couldn't get them to move to get off myself.
I tried to get his hand off the railing. No way. It was like it was locked right onto it.
These men were holding on to the railing. They wouldn't jump. Fright got into them.
They stayed behind. They just thought that they would ride the ship out the best they could.
It's an awesome feeling. It was complete blackness. The water was not the most pleasant place to jump into. And unfortunately, that's what happened here.
I know when I went out there, I was looking for my lifeboat. It wasn't there. I saw another lifeboat, and I jumped in.
When I landed onto the lifeboat, instead of finding the normal complement of men, I found a mass of humanity.
If it were a lifeboat that was constructed to hold 40, there were at least 50 or 60 people. They were just jammed in there. And we didn't have very much leeway between the top of the gunnel of the boat and the water itself. It was so overloaded.
They were jam-packed with GIs. They were back from one end to the other.
And I was in the water, maybe 5 minutes before I felt somebody grab me. There was a life raft there. And he pulled me aboard. And there must have been 20, 25 men piled on this life raft. Just piled on top of each other, just holding on, you know.
In case anything would happen, everybody had to have a red light on them so rescuers could find us.
Life jacket had a little red light on. They said, if anything happens, you're in the water, turn your red light on, and we can find you. That was laughable.
There were a lot of red lights in a line trailing behind us as the ship kept moving.
You see, the ship doesn't stop when it's torpedoed. It keeps going in the direction in which it was headed. And you can see a string of these lights out for, perhaps a mile or two.
You know, you're in a heavy rough seas, you know, and then you got two boats picking you up, and they're going to find maybe 800-900 men floating around in the water.
I said, they're never going to have a chance. How are they ever going to find them?
There's a sight that I must tell you will never leave me. When I turned around, I saw the Dorchester making its final lurch into the water, and it looked like a Christmas tree. There were little red lights all along the railing of the Dorchester, and those lights represented a human being, a soldier.
There's a sight that explodes in my mind again and again. It cannot be erased. I look back at the Dorchester, where the men were standing at the rail, not a space between them, as if about to wave farewell.
You couldn't help but stare at it.
I looked back. It was the most beautiful sight I think I ever saw. All red lights. The water looked like a bed of roses.
And as the ship sank, there was hundreds and hundreds of red lights and the waves going up and down.
It still brings back tears to my eyes as I think of my buddies who were like my brothers. Why didn't they get off? Then I visualize the 4 men of God ministering to the men, praying with them.
I walked back around. I didn't want to jump off the bow because the ship was too high. I walked down toward the stern, and that's when the ship broke. When I jumped, there was a big bubble come up, and it raised me up and shoved me out like. Then I heard the words, "Pull him up."
We've got you.
The lifeboat was loaded with men right there by me.
It rolled flat on its side. When I left the ship, I didn't jump straight into the water. I got on the side of the ship and ran down from the aft end to the bow, jumping portholes. And when I saw the water boiling up, that's when I made the world's record running broad jump, and swimming at the end of it.
What it did, when it went down, the ship just spiraled off, and then it raised up like a fishing cart. Like you could hear the debris. You could hear the soldiers. You could hear a lot of crying and screaming from the ship when it made its final plunge. And you could hear different debris. I guess some of those rash or things that we'd wanted off of there and other things was falling in there when it went down.
When the ship went down, it went on a steep angle, and it went under bow first. And the stern came way up in the air.
And then when she rolled over, she rolled completely till the keel was in the air. And that's when I saw the Four Chaplains, which had climbed up, as she rolled over, they climbed up on the keel and were standing arm in arm. And I knew it was them because you could recognize them with their officers' helmets on. They each held each other arm in arm, you know. And then the boat rolled over and she nosed down. As the boat nosed down, They went down, they were still standing on the top of the boat, and when the boat went down, they went down with it. They slid off and down on the water.
For doing their duty, as they saw it, which meant, look, let's take care of these boys. We'll see it through somehow. They didn't give up in the last minute, in other words. But by that time, there was just nothing left to hang on to. No lifeboats, no life jackets. Ship had gone down, and they perished with many others.
As we were going along there, I did hear the Lord's Prayer being said from that ship. And it didn't quite finish the prayer when it slid under the ocean.
Our Domino, as it is in heaven, give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them who trespass against us.
They all went down together in this ship, linked arms, singing their prayers as if they only had one religion instead of four. They were all unified as if they represented all of mankind.
Dan Kersman is the author of a forthcoming book about the Four Chaplains.
The symbolism of the Four Chaplains is that it involves men who were dedicated to four different religions. Yet when it came to a matter of life and death, they didn't care what a man's religion was. They just cared about the fact that he was a human being and they were going to die to save other human beings. And so, to me, that's the important point, and that is the greatest symbol we could have for today, particularly after 9/11.
It's a symbol that is so important to me as an Army chaplain.
Major General Gaylord Gunhus is U.S. Army Chief of Chaplains.
That's what our role is. That's who we are. And it's really what the principle of our nation is. Servants who have given their lives in developing it, establishing it, and guarding it. And we would seek to emulate and model our life and our service and our ministry after that of the Four Chaplains.
I think one of the extraordinary elements in the saga and story of the Four Chaplains in the Dorchester is indeed our honoring that the chaplains made a choice, or shall we say, they turned down a choice.
Ken Wales is co-author with David Poling of Sea of Glory, a novel based on the story of the Four Chaplains.
In a very human way is to think, well, I'm a Methodist minister, and I might turn understandably to the first Methodist boy I would see that I knew on the ship and give him a life jacket. But those life jackets were given quickly, spontaneously to the man who needed it, with total, not even thinking about, is this a Catholic boy and I'm a priest and I can save his life? And I think that is reminder to all of us this day that indeed we look to the heart of the person, the soul and the spirit, without any regard to a particular faith group that person would belong to. We can literally look beyond human choice to the depth of the heart and the soul and the spirit that God certainly would see. And I think that is what causes many of us to celebrate this.
John Ladd, a survivor who witnessed the chaplain's selfless act of fellowship, recalled, "It was the finest thing I have seen or hope to see this side of heaven." Only 27 minutes after the torpedo struck, the last vestige of the Dorchester disappeared beneath the ink-black water. Pulled into the swirling vortex were the Reverend George Fox, Rabbi Alexander Good, Father John Washington, and the Reverend Clark Poling. They have defeated death by continuing to serve their faith. Each survives as a testament to the strength found in prayer and an embodiment of the tenet that all men are equal in the eyes of the Lord.
No Greater Love, the Four Chaplains and the Sinking of the Dorchester will return in a moment. Welcome back to the special anniversary program, No Greater Love, the Four Chaplains and the Sinking of the Dorchester. Your host is Gene Pell.
The soldier, above all other men, is required to practice the greatest act of religious training, sacrifice. In battle and in the face of danger and death, he discloses those divine attributes which his Maker gave him when he created man in his own image. The soldier who is called upon to offer and give his life for his country is the noblest development of mankind. General Douglas MacArthur.
In the moments after a U-boat torpedo mortally damaged the troop ship Dorchester, The strength, calm, and clear thinking of Four Chaplains had been critical in helping to save lives. That the ship was sinking fast was reflected in the ensuing chaos. Damaged lifeboats could not be launched. Some capsized from overcrowding or simply floated away empty. Life vests and winter clothing were left behind in bunks. Soldiers, too panicked to remember what had been taught in drills, milled about on deck. In the midst of this pandemonium, the chaplains directed men to safety, gave away their own life jackets, and offered prayers and words of encouragement. In less than half an hour, waves broke over the railing. The chaplains, performing their duties to the very end, went down with the ship. The stage was cleared of its first act. New players came forth to continue the high seas drama.
I got on a lifeboat there and we capsized it. Men kept crawling in it and we capsized it. We got it righted up again and we tried it again. We capsized it the second time. Another boy on there picked up an oar and he wasn't going to let us capsize it the third time.
Well, we heard people out there. We pulled them on board, even though some of the people asked us not to.
They said, oh no, we don't have room for any more. But I insisted.
I came upon one of the two lifeboats that escaped, the Dorchester. I was cold, frozen, frightened. There were some men sitting on the side of the lifeboat, and I said to them, unless you help me get into this lifeboat, I'm going down. I can't hold on much longer.
Well, the water was around 35, the air was 32, so unless they're well clothed, they're not going to last long there. Man can't survive in the water that long.
We've seen bodies all around drifting. The chill of the water got most of them. They wasn't prepared for it. Many of them came out with just in their BBDs or underwear and never had any clothing on at all. And they were just drifting around. You seen those little lights bobbing up and down. And there was no life in the men that was in them either.
As we continued to row in our lifeboat, it seemed one of the crewmen from the Dorchester, a young black man, took over command of the lifeboat. And he said to us to start singing to keep our spirits up.
Then we hung there and drifted, drifting and bobbling in the water. And it kind of looked like a wheat field with a lot of lightning bugs over the top of the wheat field.
I'm sure some of us were praying. I know I was.
At that time, we were kind of floating in the air, you might say. It's a funny sensation because your entire life flashes right in front of you. And I figured that it was all over. The life was just going to end.
By the way, not to become too theatrical, I do recall very much so, I saw my mother and brother as if I was saying goodbye to them.
First thing when I was in the water, I just see my mother getting a telegram saying your son's been missing in action. I said, this ain't for me. And then I started kicking my feet and swimming. But you're swimming in cold water and heavy equipment's like lead. You know, your legs are like lead.
Kind of wishing you would see the people and say things to them you didn't say before, and if you just kept on praying. If you weren't a religious man, you suddenly became very religious at that time. I just did a lot of praying.
I took my life jacket off and my winter parka and gave it to a guy that we pulled out of the water.
And some guy, I don't know who it was, he put a napkin over me.
So it was so cold on the raft, because I remember my feet were numb and kicking my feet against the bottom of the life raft and everything. I had no feelings from the waist down. It was just numb.
And one of the fellows who pulled on board said, I'm freezing. And so we took the oar and I was banging his legs to get the circulation back into his legs.
A lot of them were pure panic. A lot of them were exhausted. A lot of them had their heads in the water. And there was a lot of bodies floating around.
Men would panic, and one man said, I need another blanket. I want a blanket. And they get louder and louder. And he keeps yelling till they lose their voice. They get hoarse in that raw wind, and their voice is gone. And then another one said, I see the sun coming up. It's melting the butter over there on the pancakes. And I'm going over there. And he takes off, and that's the end of it. But they panic that way, and it's hard to hold a panic man.
And I was talking about getting something to eat, eating apples and stuff like that. He said, if you don't shut up, we're going to throw you the hell off the raft. So I kept right on talking. I never shut up for 7 hours.
Between drinking fuel oil and seawater, I didn't feel too good. And there's one of the fellows that was on the same raft I was on, and we've often kidded about it. If they'd have put a wick in our mouth, we'd have burned for a week.
We had about 25 easy on a raft, piled. It looked like a bunch of old wet rags all piled on top of each other. There were so many on it.
Survival depended on the 3 Coast Guard cutters that sailed in convoy with the Dorchester. War paint covered their gleaming white hulls in keeping with their new roles as escort ships and U-boat chasers. Beneath the gray veneer, they were still saviors of the seas. And their war was now a battle against time. I'm Gene Pell. Please join me for our next and final program.
You have been listening to No Greater Love, the Four Chaplains and the Sinking of the Dorchester. Unidentified voices in this program were those of Dorchester survivors Michael Warish, Ben Epstein, Wilmot Harklerode, William Kramer, Daniel O'Keefe, Paul Jorgensen, Walter Miller, Anthony Nadehor, James Erdley, Henry Gogan, Edward Dione, Roy Summers, Michael Calandrello, Hugh Moffett, and David Labadie. No Greater Love was sponsored by the World War II Veterans Committee and the Chapel of Four Chaplains, and was produced by Radio America in association with MediaWorks and the Immortal Chaplains Foundation.